no to a contradictory one. Ruled by justice, he treats every identity as it deserves. He is the actualized potential for good in its purest form, a true moral measuring rule. He is the most human and deserving of respect. Today's flawed heroes are superior in physical strength, but common, average, ordinary in mental strength. Rich in superpowers, but bankrupt in reasoning powers. They are perfect in overcoming the flawed supervillains, saving the world, the universe, yet helpless to solve their common, ordinary, average personal problems. It is like reading a perfectly physical adult with the reasoning limits of a 6-year-old. The creators of flawed ideals believe no real difference exists between the flawed hero and the flawed villain. Both have some good and some bad in them. So they blend into a grayness, where no one is better than anyone else, and where the worst can justifiably claim he is as good as gray as, the best. If it is impossible to know what is true, and to do what is right, then the flaw, the worst, will be the new standard of good. Man will be defined as a flawed, anti-rational animal, and all that corrupts and harms life will be the new virtues, like deliberately flawed eyesight or self-blindness is the ideal. Anti-life behavior will be the new standards for living. The resentment against the perfect hero is a resentment against A is A, against the integration of truth and behavior, against the non-contradictory identity of a moral ideal, against reality and life's measuring ruler, a rational moral standard. Steve Ditko, 1987. Here we go again, America. Black fragility and black privilege are once again on display in the national media. Black fragility and black privilege? What's that? Black fragility and black privilege are responses from both the black community and the ethno-Marxist influenced liberal media in this post-civil rights era. Black fragility and black privilege are major factors in American society today. Black fragility can be described as many things, but the most succinct explanation of black fragility is the American Negro's inability to comprehend and admit that they are wrong. Black privilege is the otherwise socially unacceptable petulance, outrage, anger, and violence expressed by those incapable of overcoming their own black fragility. Black fragility is the inability of the American Negro to admit blacks have it better in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world. Black fragility is the inability of the American Negro to not blame whites exclusively for the 87 years of legal slavery in the U.S., while ignoring that slavery was systematic across all human cultures, including the many African cultures, for millennia until it was ended exclusively by those same white Europeans. Black privilege allows blacks to openly and without risk of public scorn to despise whites. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to admit that their ancestors were enslaved by their own African kinsmen who defeated those weaker tribesmen and sold them to non-African slavers who then delivered them across the Old and New World. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to admit that their plight is the result of their own motherland's culture. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to admit that slavery, unfortunate as it was for those who endured it, was the best thing that ever happened to them. That slavery never dragged those unlucky victims to the New World more than 200 years ago. The faces we see on news reports of the many famines, plagues, and outbreaks of tribal genocide and warfare would belong to them and their children, and not unnamed barefooted strangers. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to admit that Africa already killed them. It chewed them up, and it spit them out. Black fragility is the American Negro, nourished on 19th century junk science and prison-born supremacist mythologies, refusal to accept modern science as it unlocks the secrets of DNA, genetics, and heredity, and as it utterly destroys the false out-of-Africa evolutionary theory. Black fragility is the inability of the American Negro to understand that the dynastic Egyptians they attempt to associate themselves were exclusively blonde and red-haired Caucasians with blue and green eyes. Those Caucasians ruled northern Africa for thousands of years, served by slaves they called Nub. Nub is the root word of Nubia, land of slaves. The Nubian was a black slave who served the white Egyptians until the Bantu invasions of the old, watered-down pharaonic kingdom. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to accept that crime statistics are not racist, and they reflect without bias the uncomfortable truths most communities in America fear to discuss honestly. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to accept that police officers are not hunting them down. Those police officers are responding to observed violations or the accounts of victims and witnesses to crime. Black fragility is the inability of the American Negro to accept that blacks are statistically the primary demographic across all criminal strata, street level to white-collar crime. Black fragility is the American Negro's inability to admit their families are responsible for 90% of all criminal victimization of all blacks and almost 50% of all whites. Black fragility is the inability for the American Negro to admit that their community is responsible for an epidemic of crime that claimed 1,000 innocent victims of all races daily. Black fragility is all of those blacks right now that are trying to deflect from these uncomfortable truths by mindlessly parroting white-on-white crime, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, Sharkeisha. Just like American Express, your black privilege race card isn't accepted here. And you, white college campus liberal black power apologist, your Africanized psyche's black privilege banter is also rejected as an enabler of black fragility. You have granted the black privilege modality to a community who embraces the same intellectual capacity for accountability as does a petulant 12-year-old schoolgirl. In other words, none. You, white college campus liberal black power apologist and black fragility black privilege enabler, are as equally responsible for every Get Whitey Day, every ghetto riot, and every knockout game victim as are the privileged black power, black separatist hate mongers like Louis Farrakhan, who openly calls for the systematic slaughter of whites. Your low self-esteem white guilt, inspired by a single ubiquitous societal condition that ended a century and a half before your own birth, has delivered onto this nation a plague of unrepentant violence from a community who in this last half-century have yet to display a single hint or shred of intent that it will one day embrace an adult's comprehension of accountability. You, white college campus liberal black power apologist and black fragility black privilege enabler, are the useful idiot who has allowed this psychic infection, this ethno-Marxism, to spread. You allow it to spread in your classrooms, your hypnotized progeny, singing their single verse you taught them so well, and they, in turn, allow the mind control mantra to propagate through the media and the social networks they have influenced. Your inability to confront black fragility, your weakness, has become a liability to this nation. Judges who rule long-established test requirements, like an understanding of math and physics, are racist, defy all logic and reason, creating an after effect called black privilege. You can't do the job, but I'll let you do it anyway, because, well, you're black. Black privilege. We see black privilege every day in the media as blacks in the public eye declare with absolute certitude they visited 57 American states and promised to put babies on breathalyzers, or as they express worry and concern about islands tipping over and capsizing into the ocean, or while others recount the American astronaut visit to the planet Mars when we were schoolchildren. Black privilege excuses these revealing displays of absolute ignorance. Your respect to fragility or race-based guilt has already kicked in, and you've already declared, that's racist for me to even notice the embarrassing public gaffes. How does it feel to be a Pavlovian puppet? Dynamo ring silver bell, you say good. Dynamo ring bronze bell, you say racist. See, I know what you think. I know what you think because I know how you've been taught to think. I know those knee-jerk responses programmed into you, that you have an instant answer every time. You've been programmed to give an answer. I'm showing you the script, so now you can start thinking for yourselves. Do the terms black fragility and black privilege offend you? Do the terms white fragility and white privilege offend you? Not so much. Still working on that blacks can't be racist because they don't hold power college commie bullshit? It didn't work then, it doesn't work now. You'll never see those same college campus commies declare that poor whites in Arkansas can no longer be racist because blacks hold the top positions of power in the Justice Department, the DHS, and the White House. They would never extend the so-called white privilege in the same manner they do the society-destroying black privilege. The acceptance of black fragility and black privilege, as expressed in the many outrageous acts of violence and the intolerant behaviors, has established a two-tiered social response regarding ability, behavior, and accountability in this nation that are in defiance of equal justice as we understand it. Black fragility and black privilege have turned American schools into institutions of chaos and violence. Cities and towns have been burned and razed by Black Lives Matter terrorists. Police and protesters have been murdered by Black Lives Matter terrorists, not because of injustice or poverty, but rather as the ultimate product of the 90 years of the Marxist socialist agenda of force-fed poisons that have brewed for generations and have now been allowed to boil over only because they have been given a wink and a nod by their like-minded commander, the anti-white bigot Barack Hussein Obama. Do as you will. Do not forget that the leader of the domestic terror group, Black Lives Matter, D. Ray McKesson, was exposed earlier this year of bragging about his conspiring with Attorney General Loretta Lynch to create the Summer of Chaos so that the great race-baiting leader, Barack Hussein Obama, can declare martial law and avoid the upcoming elections. Of course, it was ignored by the mainstream media and the usual suspects who reinforce black fragility and black privilege with their every newscast and carefully edited media report. Black fragility and black privilege is mainstream as we see traditionally Caucasian characters from classic fiction and even religious myth being race-lifted into characters now imaged as Negroes. The Black Wizard of Oz, the Black Superman, the Black Spider-Man, the Black Nick Fury, the Black Vikings, the Black Magnificent Seven. These are all examples of the media catering to black fragility while empowering the black privilege, black supremacist mindset with every outrageous spectacle. Black fragility and black privilege will no doubt be rejected by those very same individuals who owe their current positions exclusively because of black fragility and black privilege. The ignorant Joy Reids, the laughable Tourés, the stuttering Mark Lamont Hills, the babbling D.L. Hugleys, the arrogant, fact-free blowhards like the Neil deGrasse Tysons and the Michael Eric Dysons, the feminine hygiene product-adorned Melissa Harris Perrys, the black hole curious Don Lemons, and a cadre of black fragility-spouting buffoons, all 1970 comedy routines allowed because of black fragility, the black privilege, and white guilt to present themselves as educated and rational purveyors of beneficial and socially redeeming opinions. A fucking joke. Unfortunately, America, you are the punchline of that joke. Just look at how the rest of the world treats your jive-talking Barry Obama, like the fool he's proved himself to be, in word and deed. Only you, America, remain hypnotized by the very fragile and unfairly privileged Kenyan loser. Only you, America, allow the flip-flopping fictional narrative of Barack Hussein Obama, a.k.a. Barry Soetoro, a.k.a. Barry Dunham, a.k.a. Charles Burnell, to continue. You're so confused by black privilege, you don't know when to say enough is enough. You don't know when to say enough is enough out of the fear of triggering the ever-present black fragility that waits patiently for every perceived offense. The privileged Eric Holder, who declared he would never prosecute his people, was correct, like a broken clock might be at the proper time, when he stated America is too cowardly to have an honest discussion on race. His own black fragility prevents him from initiating said discussion of reality. That black fragility and black privilege have grown from nothing to a nation-paralyzing and social-crippling standard acceptable to far too many is proof of Holder's defiant statement. You allowed this by allowing others to promote lies and hatred to a point that has American cities burning, and where innocent victims to a single demographic's torrent of violence number 1,000 daily. America doesn't have a crime problem. It has a black fragility and black privilege problem. 85% of all national gun crimes are committed by black males 15 to 35 years of age. Black males, statistically, are the number one rapists, the number one robbers, and the number one